Welcome to the Family Resource Center San Mateo County families and providers who are joining us tonight. We are presenting Making the Transition from IFSPs to Preschools, IEPs. And this training is intended to provide information to families and providers. And this is specifically for the age group of children under the age of 3, receiving Golden Gate Regional Center Early Start Services. And then you will learn a bit about how to begin the assessment process with your child's local school district. I am here with my team. My name is Patricia Drugo. I am the Family Resource Center Supervisor. And I have here tonight Iris Buen, the FRC Training Coordinator, and Gabriela Diaz Santos, our Family Resource Center Coordinator. And Gabriela is going to continue with the following slides, and then I'll join you in a minute.
As she mentioned, my name is Gabriela. I'm the Family Resource Center Coordinator. My pronouns are she, her, hers, in AN Spanish. I am the parent of a child with special needs and have been guiding my daughter through this journey with 6 years of experience. As an FYI, as mentioned, we'll be recording today's training. It will be recorded for the purposes of training our new team members, along with sharing the recordings of our trainings in our website. To begin with, the Family Resource Center wants to make sure families know how to reach us. Our FRC is here to serve parents of children with special needs or disabilities who reside in San Mateo County with information, education, parent-to-parent support, resources, referrals, along with support in understanding how to navigate the disability system in our county. All services are free, and the FRC is staffed by parents of children with special needs, disabilities, or who are neurodiverse. I encourage all San Mateo County families who have children receiving early intervention through GGRC to contact us to learn more about our e-newsletter, our autism and Spanish support groups, my child's binder, and trainings. Next slide. As a friendly reminder, as mentioned, this training will be recorded. Please mute yourself when not speaking. Use the chat and raise hand features for questions and comments. There will also be a Q&A session at the end. Please be present and respectful. We honor confidentiality, so we encourage our participants to refrain from using names and last names or share detailed information related to your case or others. Okay, let's jump in. This is the agenda for today's training. Our goal is to cover each of these areas and to leave enough time for Q&A. Should you require more support, we'll invite you to reach out to the FRC to schedule a phone meeting. I'll ask my FRC team to monitor the chat for questions. So step 1 would be the referral process. Step 2, the transition meeting. Step 3, the assessment plan. Step 4, the assessment. Step 5, the IEP meeting, followed by tips, special education terms, services through your private medical insurance, ongoing services, also known as Lanterman Act services, and Q&A. Yay, your child is turning 3. Soon, your child will be celebrating their 3rd birthday. Along with birthday celebrations will come a change in your child's services. Your child will be transitioning from early start system to possibly preschool through the special education system. Please keep in mind that our goal in this training is to provide support for families whose children are receiving early intervention services through GGRC. And if your child is not receiving early intervention services, there is information here that is still relevant to you, and I'll be sure to point that out to you. This 5-step guide on transitioning to preschool services will help you to navigate this move from your family program to a school program. Okay. So we have step 1, the transition process. 6 months before your child's 3rd birthday, your GGRC early start caseworker, also known as your social worker, should begin having conversations with you about this process. Your GGRC social worker will inform about the special education and begin the transition from IFSP to special education when your child is 2.5 years old. Your GRC social worker will notify the school district that there will be a final IFSP transition meeting at least 3 months before your child's 3rd birthday. In addition, if your child has a significant developmental delay, your GGRC social worker will refer your case to GGRC's ongoing services, also known as the Landsman Act services. For non-Golden Gate Regional Center clients, if your child is not a client of GGRC and is interested in pursuing special education, write a letter to your local school district to request for an initial assessment in all areas of suspected need to determine special education eligibility. Here are overview of 3 possible meetings you will hear about: the IFSP, the IPP, and the IEP. As we mentioned in step 1, referral process, your GGRC caseworker should schedule a transition meeting with you and your school district. This meeting is best done around your 2.5-year mark. So the IFSP, who will be attending this meeting? That would be your GGRC social worker, a representative from your school district, a parent or legal guardian of the child. This meeting is held to review your child's early intervention progress and close your early start case. During this meeting, you will be discussing ongoing Landsman Act services through GGRC. This program is for children ages 3 and up. So we have the IPP, also known as the Individualized Personal Plan. An individualized program plan is a meeting to discuss the assessment results for ongoing services through the regional center, ages 3 and up. There are 5 eligible criteria. If eligible, the regional center identifies the services and supports to reach your child's ongoing goals outside of the education system. For example, after school care, summer, respite, diapers, etc. Followed by the 3rd meeting, individualized education program, also known as the IEP, an individualized education plan. Meeting is to determine eligibility and address the special education needs for the child. To give you a visual, here's an IEP roadmap of the timeline and process for the IEP. Please feel free to take a picture. First, you will write the letter in requesting the assessment. Then you have 15 calendar days to receive a response from the school district to get the assessment plan. Parent will then receive a packet with forms, questionnaires, the assessment plan, and other documents. Once parent provides consent, signs the assessment plan, the district has 60 calendar days to complete the assessment in all areas and hold the IEP meeting. You never want to wait too long to complete the assessment plan request because it is a long process. They will implement the IEP, and implementing the IEP really should happen within a week or 2. There is nothing in the law that says they have to implement in a certain amount of time, but it certainly isn't months later. Then follows the yearly IEPs. One thing for families who already have an IEP is that you can call an emergency IEP meeting. Families can have as many IEPs a year. So for example, if your child has a new diagnosis, or if your child has met one or more of their goals, we need another IEP to create new goals. We want to have high expectations for our children who have special needs and disabilities. I will pass this over to Patricia.
Thank you, Gabriela. I always find that roadmap very helpful to understand it, because it's sometimes easy to forget that it is a continuation and a progress to go from the assessment all the way to the actual IEP meeting, which can take a few months. And, it's a process with a lot of forms, a lot of information exchange, reports. So it can be very emotional. But let's talk about what's an IEP. An IEP is overall an individualized education program, and it refers to different meetings. People sometimes say, "Oh, I'm going to go to my IEP," and it's a term, it's an acronym that we use a lot. The IEP can be three different things in this context. It could be the initial meeting that determines whether your child is eligible for special education. The annual meeting, like Gabriela mentioned, once you have an IEP signed and approved, then, annually you want to meet with the team to discuss the progress and see, if there are any goals that need to be rewritten, or maybe the child that doesn't need anymore an IEP. An IEP is actually the plan itself. It's the written description of your child's educational program. Now that we are more leaning towards digital, a lot of families sometimes might get digital copies, but the school also will send you a written report for your records. Next. So here is an example of a letter that a parent can send to the school district to request the initial assessment. And I just want to clarify that when sometimes parents are receiving the children are receiving early start services, the social worker, the New Jersey social worker, can help with the letter, providing a template. We can also provide templates for families when they request it. So, but there's an advantage when there's early start services, because the social worker in most cases will provide the letter and parents just need to fill it out, and then this letter will be sent. For the parents who are not GGRC clients, but they know and they're getting familiar with what an IEP process is and what it is to request a school assessment, this letter will also be necessary. And this letter needs to have the information of the parent's full name. One of them, it's sufficient. Could be the mom or the dad. Their address, important because it's the school district needs to determine that they are living in the school district and it's the appropriate school district. A phone number to contact you and an email. We also want to add the name of the director of the special education department or the school principal or the school that your child will attend. The name of the school district, the address of the school district, and the city and all the information that is usually available on the website. Then the date of the letter, right? The day that you are writing the letter, hopefully it's the same day that you're going to send it. So it's super important because that's when the calendar starts ticking. Then you want to add the name of the child and the date of birth. And this is just a sample, as we mentioned, but it usually is the introduction of your child's first and last name, either if you're requesting a full evaluation, or it could be sometimes just a speech, or sometimes it could be just maybe for like physical therapy, like a gross motor evaluation. But in general, we always recommend families to request a full evaluation, because sometimes even if a child has only one deficiency or one thing that is affecting him, like a speech, sometimes it can also interfere and hinder the progress in other areas like gross motor, fine and gross motor skills. Sometimes could be cognitive, because it delays the other areas. And sometimes we want to have a big picture of the way that a child is processing information at the time that they're doing the assessment. We want to mention the concerns. You want to describe with your own words what you observe. It's a concern. Sometimes parents have a lot of information, like my child is not holding the pencil, cannot follow directions, is unable to still use the restroom, doesn't seem to understand instructions, falls down very easily when running, things like that. Usually we have this another paragraph that says, I have discussed my concerns with my child's pediatrician, and she or he has encouraged me to request a school district assessment. It could be added or it could be removed. In most of the cases, pediatricians are aware of it, and they fully usually encourage parents to do the assessment when parents are, mentioning these concerns. And actually, it's very helpful sometimes for the pediatrician to have a copy of an IEP because it helps also to monitor that. A lot of pediatricians do get the copies, request the copies of the IEPs, and they're very helpful when the school district doesn't cover certain services or therapies, and then you can always pursue therapies through your medical insurance. So continue with the letter. There's a paragraph there stating the law, under the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, that it's something that it's standard, and then the school districts, understand. And then for the families who are monolingual, so have other language other than English, or who speak at home and they don't speak English, it's a great idea to add in the letter that they're requesting an interpreter, and also a copy of their IEP and all correspondence actually in the language of their family language. So it's super important. Next slide. When this letter is completed and you're ready to send it, and usually I will suggest the families, there are different ways to send this letter. It could be in person, you can mail it, and then also you can send it by email. It varies based on the school district. Some school districts prefer emails, so you will have to do this letter and mail it to probably an email address that it's an administrative assistant, and they will receive it and process and open the case. If you send a letter like regular postman, I will suggest the families when they do that to get a signature receipt, so that when the letter or the envelope is delivered to the school district, someone needs to sign that they're receiving it, because sometimes things can get lost and there's no proof that it was received. And sometimes we have families waiting for months saying, I sent a letter, but I never heard from the district. So it's because I never received it. And the other one is to go in person to the school district, for the school districts that have office hours and they're open, and you can go with your original copy and with the original document, and then with an additional copy, and then you ask them to please stamp it and sign it that they receive it, because that's the day when that's the official time where it counts that they have 15 days to respond to the letter acknowledging that they received the request, and they're gonna send you a packet with a lot of documents for you to sign. So super important. This plan that sometimes the assessment letter requires that the school district sends, it has to include all the type of assessments that the district considers will be good for them to determine the level of need of your child. So if a parent is requesting that the child is saying that the child has communication issues, then there's got to be probably a speech evaluation that needs to be marked. If a child is having difficulty moving, or maybe physical, that's gross motor areas and skills, then maybe a physical evaluation needs to be done, right? And if there are concerns about maybe autism or social skills, then it has to be another assessment also as well done. And I'll show you in a later slide what does that look like, what do they call it. Once you receive the assessment plan that the school district is proposing to evaluate your child, then you need to complete it and you need to sign it, and then mail it, or go in person and return it. And then from that moment that you are returning that packet, the forms and everything that the school district is requesting you to fill out, then they have 60 days to do the assessment and evaluate your child, either if it's maybe if he is in a daycare, they will come and observe your child in a daycare. Or if the child is not in daycare or any other learning center, then you probably will have to bring your child to the school district, one of the locations, so that one of the, either a psychologist or a therapist will do the evaluation. Usually it's a few hours. Sometimes that assessment can be done in one day if the child cooperates, but if not, it could be more than 2 days in different hours. So yeah, that's definitely something that is super important to do. And remember that parents and legal guardians, caregivers are an equal member of the IEP. Next slide. And this is the slide that shows, and it's very similar. A lot of the school districts have this template. This is actually what an assessment plan looks like. It has, usually for the transition to preschool transition to IFSP to IEP, the checkbox mark is the initial, because it's the first IEP, the first assessment that a child will do, because that's when they start the academic and the school district level. It's age 3, right? Then after 3, then we have preschool, we have pre-K, and then we have kindergarten, and then elementary, and then middle school and high school. So for the purpose of this training, the checkbox of where a child will look like, if it's a 2-year-old going to 3, is the initial one. Then it will have the name of the parents, the date, the school district, the district and the school name, the grade that will be the child if he's going to preschool, the birthday, the primary language, and then if it's a non-native speaker, English speaker, then they will put something like that. So this is the part of the evaluation areas, right? If academic achievement is usually evaluated more like for older kids who are already above and 5, like they already have some sort of academic instruction. For a preschooler, it's not quite marked. So usually most of the checkboxes that will qualify based on the need of your child and the previous reports and the therapies that they received during early start will have to be marked right here. If a child was receiving speech therapy, then probably we need to do an evaluation in language and speech, communication, and development. If the child had some, issues with mobility, then it will be motor development. If they had some behavioral concerns, then we will have to do an assessment in social emotional. If there were some concerns with autism, then adaptive behavior will be marked. Post-secondary is for older children that are more like high school level. They will also do sometimes intellectual development, but that's something that you definitely can connect with us if you have questions, if that's marked. It's usually not something that they will do for a 3-year-old, but sometimes they will do it if there's some concern. And they will do health, overall health, like just check if, child is eating and developing normally. We have here, I consent to the assessment. So if you want your child evaluated and you agree with all the marks, all the areas of the boxes that the school district proposed, then you then can say, I consent to the assessment, and I understand that the results will be kept confidential and that I will be invited to attend the IEP team meeting to discuss the results. And I also understand that special education services will be provided to my child without my written consent, right? Everything has to be by parent consent. Sometimes there might be some discrepancies about, like, I mentioned that my kid has a lot of motor issues, but I don't see that you are doing a motor development assessment. So maybe you can mark, I will like, so that's not the first one, but the third one. It says, I would like the following assessment information to be considered by the IEP team. And then you can mark their motor development. And if you, for example, do not agree with any of the proposed assessments, you can mark the one in the middle that it says, I do not consent to the proposed assessment described above. But it usually will be the first one and the third one. And it is, you're right. I mean, maybe there's a huge mistake. Maybe they didn't get right, or who knows, maybe there's some administrative issue and they didn't really send you an appropriate evaluation plan. So you have to read this very carefully. And if you need some support reading an assessment plan and you're not sure, you can please give us a call. And then you have to sign it. Let's say if you consent to the assessment, you can sign it, put the date, phone number, any comments, and then that assessment plan is ready to be signed. Next. Okay, just give me a second. So once the assessment plan is signed, the assessments will be scheduled. The child might be observed in various settings. It could, like I mentioned previously, it could be that if he's enrolled in a daycare or in a learning center, they might schedule some time to visit the child and observe him or observe her. If there's no enrollment and the child is at home and is not attending any daycare or learning center, they might schedule you to bring your child to a school site so they can do the assessment. This is the time where the IEP team will gather all the information that, they will review everything that the parents signed, different questionnaires that the parents had to sign, the teachers had to sign, maybe even the doctor, maybe sometimes they send a questionnaire for the doctor to sign. If a child was receiving an early start, they might want to hear about what the speech therapist recommendations are, if they had a speech therapy delay or occupational therapy. So all those reports are going to be super important. And then the next step is they're going to do a report. This is going to be prepared by the school district and presented to the family because they have to gather all that information. And it's a written assessment report with lots of pages. In the initial request for assessment, they're going to ask you to send all those reports prior to the IEP meeting. Before your IEP meeting, though, I do want to mention, before your IEP meeting, once they give you a date, let's say they give you a date to attend the IEP meeting by February 30th. No, I'm sorry, that's 20th. And actually, it is okay for you to request a copy of the IEP assessment before your actual meeting. Actually gives you days ahead to review the plan, and you can find out if your child was found eligible or not before the IEP meeting. But you need to request by, either by email or in a letter saying, I want a copy of the IEP report, the assessment report, 2 or 3 days before the IEP meeting. And it's usually ready by that time. And it will get you more ready and prepared to attend the IEP meeting and have your questions answered and maybe propose some other things that you might think might be a better idea, or maybe change some of the goals. If your child does not qualify for services based on the results of the assessments, a meeting will be offered to discuss the assessment results. So if a child is eligible or not eligible, they still will do the IEP meeting. But then again, if your child is not eligible, then there's another step that we have to do sometimes, which is, find out why is he not eligible. Now, do you agree with that assessment results? Do you want to have someone else to review the assessments and the percentages and the scale where the percentage where your child is scored? So that is definitely possible, and that's a different step, right? When we're not in agreement with maybe the denial. And then I just want also to remind parents and providers that throughout the entire transition from early start to the IEP process, you can always call us, because I know that sometimes we get stuck in some questions that might be pretty and very, very super and easy to be answered immediately in a phone call or by email. And so you definitely can contact us at any time. Next slide. So depending on the functioning levels of your child, so sometimes we'll say, well, what is the eligibility for an individualized education program? So we do have some criteria or some functional levels, but in general, there are 13 criteria that if a child has, then they automatically qualify for an IEP. And one of them is autism, to be born deaf or blindness, or maybe having an accident and that, that ends up having a child losing their sight or being deaf when they're little. Any emotional disturbance, like some behavioral, that is very obvious and it doesn't allow the child to be able to learn or focus or sit in a classroom. Hearing impairments. You don't have to be completely deaf to qualify. Sometimes hearing impairment, sometimes they have partial loss. So that can be also evaluated. Intellectual disability, multiple disabilities, like having more than one disability, like some kids have genetic disorders, and then in addition to that, they have other like gastro problems or other diagnoses. Having an orthopedic impairment, other health impairment, and in this category, actually, it's one of the most popular questions could be ADHD. It's qualifies as another health impairment sometimes for qualifying criteria to have an IEP when it impacts the child's learning. Any other specific learning disability, speech or language impairment, any traumatic brain injury, and visual impairment. So a child has to be at least meet one of the eligible criteria to be able to have an IEP. And case by case, sometimes having a diagnosis doesn't mean that they guarantee an IEP. There are some kids who have, for example, autism, but they're very high functioning and they need some support, but not a lot. And then it kind of ends up with maybe the level of support they need doesn't really qualify for an IEP. And we're more than happy to work with those families sometimes when they are in that area where they still feel like the child is help, but it doesn't qualify for an IEP. Sometimes it could be a 504 or maybe other types of accommodations. So, and just you need to remember that an IEP main focus is to allow your child to access their academic potential. An IEP is no longer a medical. It's not medical in nature. It's more academic, and whatever the child needs to to be able to learn, it's the goal. Next slide. So what happens during the IEP meeting? So the IEP meeting is held after all the assessments are completed, and that usually happens, within 60 days, calendar days that you sign the assessment plan. Remember to request a copy of the assessment before your IEP meeting. 2 or 3 days is sufficient. Although sometimes some families don't get it, even if they're requested. So, but it is a valid thing to ask. At this time, the results of the assessments during this meeting, the assessment will be reviewed and the eligibility for special education services will be determined. This is the opportunity where you can share your educational questions and concerns with your IEP meeting in person. So you have to be ready with your notes. Hopefully you already had a copy of the plan, so you have prepared your questions. You can ask during that meeting for the IEP team, to clarify what services are being offered. This is not a moment to be shy or say, I don't understand. Please just ask what you need to know. And if it's not clear still, then you can always sign it later. So who is usually in an IEP meeting? So what are the members of an IEP meeting? First and most important is the parents and legal guardians, the general education teacher. It could be one of them, especially if the child is maybe was found eligible to go to special education class, which is different than regular class. It could be also the special education. So I'm sorry, the general education teacher is the general education teacher of a preschool, for example, is going to be in charge of the preschool. Maybe they have like 20 kids or 30 kids in the classroom. The special education teacher is the one that works just with the kids who are in the special day class, special education class, and they are usually smaller groups and they have more support and they have sometimes an assistant. The special education director or a representative will be in that meeting. A psychologist, a school psychologist, a pathologist or speech pathologist if there was any concern with communication, occupational therapist with anything related to gross or fine motor skills, any additional specialist, a translator if it was requested, and you can bring any other family, friends, or anybody that you want for emotional support. Sometimes parents can invite a special education advocate with them, bring them. Initially, if it's the first IEP meeting, probably it's best if just parents go on their own, but you are the best, you take the best decisions for your child and yourself. So if you want to bring them, you just need to notify them within 2 or 3 days before the meeting that you're going to bring either a friend or a family member or a special education advocate. If you do bring a lawyer, though, that's a different topic. But this is just for your initial IEP. And the translator request is usually, we actually really recommend to request it as soon as possible in writing, because then the school district has time to look for a person who can really provide interpretation, and you really want to be sure that there's someone who can tell you everything, who can help you understand, and they're the middle person who will help you to understand the whole IEP process. And sometimes some parents who have other languages than English request that the meeting is recorded, and that's also something that you can do. You can request that the meeting is recorded, but you have to request it also in writing 2 days before. Next slide. During the IEP meeting, the way that the flow of the meeting usually goes with introductions, statements, introductions of the team, who is there at that moment, who is taking the notes, and then they jump into this, and they also do statements of present levels of performance, meaning like they would talk about how your child is doing. They usually do the most positive things of what a child is doing. Oh, it's funny, makes jokes, it shows good, the behavior at school, or, is eager to learn, or seems curious about, communicating. Things that are positive usually are shared at the beginning of the meeting. Then they go to the areas of the strength and need, where they will also talk about what did they observe, maybe the areas of need. And this is an opportunity for everybody to mention the things that they, in addition to what the IEP has collected, all the information that is in paper and it was reported for months, all of that is there. But this is another time where parents can maybe give an update. If something changed in the last few weeks or in the last 2 months, they can actually say, my child wasn't doing this, but now it's doing this. So this is a good time to mention all of those things, give an update. Especially if things change drastically or in a way that it will impact. Then they will go over the assessment results. They will tell you then if your child is eligible or no. So this is one of the most important parts of the IEP, right? Is your child eligible or not? If they are, then we will go to the measurable goals in all the areas of need. So they will talk about like what areas need more support, and then come up with some, ideas of what proposed goals that might be, have to work during the year, because an IEP is an annual IEP, so it's valid for 1 school year. So you want to be sure that you understand what the goals are proposed, and if you think maybe something else can be added, you can mention it during this meeting. Or you can just take your notes and maybe connect. You don't have to sign it, but you can also just kind of process the information and just take all the information and all the questions. Take all your notes when you're listening about the goals, because it really needs to show that they're addressing all the areas of concern and also they're taking the assessment results into consideration. The annual measure benchmarks. So that's another one that is super important to mention because sometimes there has to be progress. The schools needs to send you quarterly reports of the IEP progress. Like if your child is getting 2 or 3 months of speech therapy, then the therapist needs to be doing some progress and they have to report it. And they will send you a report, written report usually, about how they're doing for the first quarter goal, the first 3 or 4 months. You probably know by the 6-month mark if the goals are working, if you see an improvement in your child, and also the teachers are reporting improvements. So understanding the goals is important, and the measurement and how much that percentage of improvement they're expecting for your child. Sometimes we say by the end of 2023 or the school year of 2023, my child, or I don't know, let's say I name Peter, will be saying 5 words or saying a full sentence. So how's that progress tracked, right? It has to be written in the IEP by repetitions, by the amount of repetitions, by the amount of times that your child is doing this correctly. They can say, it's trackable and he's actually, reaching the goal. So sometimes some kids reach the goals a lot faster than, the end of the annual IEP. So, and that's great because we don't want the kid to be all the time and having an IEP or special education if they are actually learning. But for the kids who are struggling more and need more support, then we want to monitor those goals to be sure that the goals are appropriate and they are showing improvement. And the parents need to be always keeping an eye on those reports. Are they offering you a free, appropriate public education, more commonly as FAP? So yes, this is mandated for the school to provide you a free and appropriate public education for your child. There's special funds to do that. Special education receives different amounts of funding for that. And your child, if they need services, then and they qualify for an IEP, it's their right to receive this, this offer. Are they proposing any modifications for your child? That has to be mentioned in the IEP. If they qualify for transportation, that's also something that they need to provide. Depends on the situation of the family. Sometimes a child is placed in a school, they're going to give them a special education class. They qualify for a special education class that's far, and then maybe a family doesn't have a car. There are different criteria why they will, offer transportation. But it's not for a lot of the families. So I just want you to be mindful that that's a service that it's not offered to a lot of families, but sometimes it's needed. Then there's also the extended school year. That is usually offered for children who are at risk for regression. And then usually probably at the beginning during preschool, because there's not a lot of academic, they're just doing starting to read and getting familiar with being in preschool and being social and following instructions. Maybe this is not as obvious. Could be regression maybe in communication, but if a child doesn't do, for example, the extended school year, usually during the summer, if child, for example, who was talking and then all of a sudden doesn't do the extended school year and loses the ability to talk or regresses considerably, then that needs to be noted so that the school probably continues and they offer it maybe this service probably not in the first year of an IEP, but probably in the next one then, from 4 to 5. So something for parents to know. When kids are a little older, like in elementary and middle school, usually it's more about math and language. The kid has a huge regression in math during the school breaks, then maybe they might be offered extended school year. Next slide. So signing the IEP, after you review all the documentations, the goals, and you either think that you agree. Let's say you read the IEP, you agree with the goals from the day of the meeting, and then you can sign it. And that means that from that moment, your child, probably within a week or two at the latest, can start receiving the services that they were proposed in the IEP and that you're signing. So, however, we usually recommend the parents to take the document home and review it before they sign. You can maybe keep it for a few days, a week or two. You can contact us. You can show it maybe to your therapist, the therapists that are working with your child, that know your child. You can connect with a special education advocate to help you read it and understand it. Talk to your pediatrician. Sometimes pediatricians have a lot of wealth and, have a wealth of information that they can share with you. So there are different ways, and maybe you can do all of them. So it's based on what your timing and if you have a lot of questions. But if you feel like it's a good plan and you feel like you're trusting the process, then you can go ahead and sign. If you're not sure, definitely, consult with another individual agencies. And there's a way that you can do just a partial agreement with the IEP. Let's say there are 4 goals proposed for your child, and you only agree with 2 of them. But you would like maybe the other 2 to be modified. You can sign and specify what parts would you like to be modified. So that's possible too. So you can sign for the 2 that you're in agreement, and then they can start working on those 2 goals. The school district, the team can start working on those 2 goals until you connect maybe in a few more weeks and maybe draft new goals or get more input. And then when you are ready to do the other 2 goals, then you can do that. And then the child can do, instead of 2, just go do all the goals that were signed and proposed. So it will be 4. So there's always, don't just decline if you disagree with, if you think some goals are okay and then other ones are not, you can do a partial sign of this with the IEP. If you disagree though completely with it, then you can just sign that you attended the meeting. There's a checkbox that said, I attended the IEP meeting, but I disagree with the IEP. And then you might want to put a little note saying, I disagree with the IEP. And then they will let you know if your child's right, and then you can connect with us to go to the next step. But sometimes it's just doing some sort of appealing process. Next slide. So some tips, IEP pro tips that we call it. You are, as you the child parents, you are part and crucial, and you know your child better than anyone. So you are the expert of your child. Be ready to prepare your thoughts and questions before the meeting, and you want to have an idea of what you want to achieve. If you want your child to continue receiving services and you feel strongly that maybe the evaluation, that the assessment wasn't, ideal and you're not sure of it, then there's other steps to do. But, prepare your thoughts and be ready to talk with the team. Request an assessment reports prior to IEP meeting. As we mentioned, you have the right to request it 2 or 3 days before the IEP meeting. So you're ready and if your child, what the goals are, if it's eligible, or if it was denied, then you can also know and you can read everything. Ask how much time has been allotted for the IEP meeting. So usually they will give you an IEP meeting. It's about an hour and a half. Some IEP meetings based on the need to be going to 2, but usually it doesn't go more than an hour and a half. It would be best if you have a little kid or if you have someone else to keep an eye on your child. So if you do this IEP meeting, if you go to the IEP meeting, you are not distracted. And if you do this even virtually, if someone else is entertaining your child, that will be the best arrangement. You might want to wish to record your IEP, and you have to give a 24 written notice. Some people do 2 days, but 24 is like the maximum. It's just because they, it's just courtesy, and it's definitely something that it will get the staff ready to be prepared for that. Give 24-hour written notice if you plan to bring an external provider for support. So it could be a family member, or if you can, it can be a special education advocate. Could be a lawyer. Stay focused and positive. Keep your child at forefront of meeting. Some people say, take a photo with you so that everybody gets to know your child. Sometimes maybe they only see him a few hours. They might not remember who your child is. So you want to have a picture. That's a good idea. If you need to take a break, or you're feeling very emotional and you're feeling confused, you can always say, I need 5 minutes, a few minutes, and take a little break. Remember that the IEP meeting, it's important to assume best intentions and build positive relationships with the team, the evaluating your child. Communicate well and have very clear who is the teacher, who is your case manager, because it's the person that centralizes all the information and shares and organizes the meetings and follow-up meetings. So you want to be sure who is your case manager. Every IEP has a case manager assigned. So someone that does all the data, organizes the assessments, will send communications to you and to all the team, the school staff, that all the school IEP team. And then to be sure who is that person, and you have their number and you have their email, and in an area where you are actually always accessing, and it's easy access for you. And always ask lots of questions, ask for clarification. There's a lot of information during the IEP meeting, and it's very easy to get confused. So take as many notes as you want and ask questions. Always ask for clarification. So we have a little bit here, some special education terms for you to read. I'm not going to read them just for the sake of time, but we're going to be sending this PowerPoint presentation to you all so you can get more familiar. We also have in our website acronyms that you can look at when you have some time. I noticed that. Iris, if you want to just copy it again, the acronyms in the chat, that would be great. So these are definitely education terms like IDEA, IEP, FAP, free and appropriate public education, the least restrictive environment, inclusion, accommodations, modifications, the annual IEPs and triennial IEPs. Annual IEPs, IEP goes, it's reviewed every year, and then triennials is once the child is already found eligible, every 3 years they have to go through another assessment. So every 3 years they do another triennial assessment, a very in-depth assessment, because children do change as they go through the school system. So a child who has needs at the age of 3 will not be the same 3 years later. It will be changing. So we need to be sure that parents are ready to do triennials. And the special education is not really a place, it's services. So some kids have a special education, receive a special education services, and they are attending just a regular classroom, just a regular class with peers. And then sometimes it could be a special education class, but that's based on the needs of the child. Next step. Now we're going to talk a little bit about GRC ongoing services, also known as the Lanterman Act services. So for most of you all who are here, probably your child is receiving early start services. What happens after the age 3? So there are 5 eligible criteria that determine if a child will receive Lanterman Act services or ongoing services. The first one is autism. I think it was pasted in the chat. If you can put it again, Iris, that'd be great. It's autism, cerebral palsy, epilepsy, global developmental delay, and another condition that significantly affects a child's global development, like Down syndrome. Your child might be eligible after age 3 for ongoing regional center services. So your caseworker, your early start caseworker, can assist you with applying for this before they are age 3 or about that transition time. And then you can also look at the website, or you can call us if you need more information. There's a form that needs to be completed. It's different than the early start. And if you need some help and assistance doing this, or you're not sure, maybe you already passed your, you already stopped receiving early start services, but your child you never heard about what the Lanterman Act services is, please let us know. Next slide. Okay. Like I mentioned before, your pediatrician can be a great ally for your child's ongoing medical needs. IEP, they definitely get an IEP copy report. I think most of the pediatricians appreciate when parents share their IEPs, and my child was eligible for IEP, because sometimes they are with you from the very beginning when you're mentioning some concerns, you're seeing some things that are, like you're not sure they're okay. So sometimes pediatricians can help you from the early on, like when a child is maybe 1 year or 18 months. So they know your child and they walk with you through that whole process when they start school district. So it's a great idea for you to share your IEP with your doctor, so they know what services the school district offer you. And if you feel like maybe your child will benefit from additional therapies, for example, like, to address areas where maybe they were not found eligible at the school district level. Like maybe they need still some support with occupational therapy services or speech therapy services or ABA therapy for kids who have autism, or any other therapy, like maybe social classes. Then your pediatrician can maybe request those, put a prescription for it. And then maybe your insurance plan can pay for it. So that's super helpful. So that's why I encourage families to keep your pediatrician involved. Yeah, they can also refer you to hearing assessments, dietitians, psychologists, psychiatrists, and it's usually run through your insurance. And maybe sometimes you might have to do some co-pays. If you have medical, probably there are no co-pays, but you need to check with your insurance about, and be aware of what your benefits and deductibles will be. And then, yeah, sometimes I think we are very concerned when we know that a child has a lot of medical needs, they qualify for a school district, but they're not tapping into, their insurance for additional services. So we want to make most family aware that, sometimes also a child who has more than 3 years old, and they have all the criteria that I mentioned previously, they are connected to the Lanterman Act services, because they might also assist you with other things that will elevate the family support, the baseline for the family. The kids, reach the potential. Maybe they need respite, for the family to take a little break from, their everyday, care for the child. So they can ask someone to support them for a few hours during the day. There are other services that they can qualify, like sometimes summer school, summer programs when the school is closed. So all of those things are offered by the Lanterman Act. So super important. Next slide. And I'm going to pass, now we're almost at the end of the presentation, and we're going to open to questions and answers.
Thank you. So we will go ahead and just recap some ways you can contact us. So we have our phone number listed here, along with our email, info@smcfrc.org, our Facebook link, and our website here. The FRC team will be emailing a copy of this training to all attendees tonight. We would like to thank everyone for taking the time out of your evening to attend this training. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here. Please follow us on Facebook. We have a lot of trainings coming up. the following months, you're more than welcome. There will be lots of opportunities for you to understand more and start your, expanding your knowledge about the transition and also what an IEP is. And questions always come and things evolve and change. So we're here to serve you. And we have families who we serve when they're very little. And now we have high schoolers and middle schoolers. So we are here in the community to support you. Thank you so much for being here tonight.